first, Senator Tim Sheldon is to your left. He's going into his 25th year in Olympia, the legislature. Started in the House, now he's in the Senate. As you all know, he's been part of the leadership team for the last term, and going forward will certainly play a really important role, so we're really glad to have him here. Born and raised here in Mason County, you all know that, and I will let all of these guys tell you about what committees they're seeking to serve on, or maybe have already been assigned, I'm not sure. Next we have Representative Drew McEwen. Drew is serving his second term. Yeah, he just was re-elected for the second time and is the founder and president of the firm Falcon Financial, who you recognize as being an active chamber member. I'll also let Drew tell you what committees he's going to serve on. And then last but not least, Representative Dan Griffey, just elected freshman to the State House. Happy to have Dan here. Born and raised in Allen. Dan's a firefighter. His wife Dinah's in the room with him. And Dan, of course, took the seat that Representative Kathy Haig held for a very long time, and we thank her for her service. She was a long-time participant in this event. So thank you all for being here. You guys have a couple minutes to sort of give your highlights. And then I'll go through briefly our priorities of last year and then this year. And we'll discuss those. Thanks. Go ahead and start, Senator Sheldon.
Okay, hey, thank you very much for coming today. It's always fun to get together. Julie said 25 years. I thought, man, that's a long time to go down to Olympia every day. I don't know how many bills or votes I've taken, thousands and thousands, but you know, it is a great place. It's a lot of fun, and we're very fortunate to be so close to Olympia. And I think if you serve from Walla Walla or Penasket or someplace, it really makes it tough. But Olympia is a great place, and I really enjoy serving under the two fellows to my left, and looking forward to Dan's swearing in on Monday. It's quite an event. Dan worked very hard to get elected, and he's going to do a really great job as long as Drew and I keep him in line.
That's pretty hard.
Yeah, pretty hard. But this will be an interesting session. You know, every session has a trademark issue. And I think this will obviously be an issue about McCleary decision, about education. But I think we're very fortunate to have almost $2.9 billion in new revenue this biennium. That's a lot of new money coming into our general fund. We have to spend it wisely and allocate it and prioritize. So it's going to be an interesting session. I'll just give you the quick layout on the Senate. We have 25 Republicans, 24 Democrats, and I serve with the Coalition Caucus, which is I'm joined with the Republicans, so we'll have 26 members in our caucus, and the minority caucus will have 23. So I'll be, hopefully, there's a vote of the full Senate on the 12th, on Monday, for the position of President Pro Tem, which I served for the last 2 years. So hopefully I'll receive enough votes. You never know who shows up to continue doing that job. And then also I'll serve as Vice Chair of the Energy, Environment Telecom Committee, as well as the Vice Chair of the Rules Committee, and I'll also be on Transportation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Pleasure to be here. Good morning. Let's dive into the committees. The House Republicans, restructured our committee assignments shortly before Christmas, and interestingly, the Speaker, Frank Chop, has consolidated a lot of committees and reduced the membership on a lot of committees, and that's created a different dynamic in the House this year. My first term, I served on 4 committees. This year will only be 2, and the freshman class, I think the most anybody's on is 3. And so it's gonna be a different dynamic down there, a different pace. I think you're gonna see a lot more bills. We're gonna have to go through through committees, which is gonna clog up the wheel a little bit. So it's gonna be just interesting, I think, how this term goes through. But in the House Republican leadership, they had pegged me to be their capital budget guy at some juncture, and to my surprise, I was taken off the committee, but I was stuck on the appropriations committee, which I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. But what our long-term plan is that if my party should have control of the House someday, we'd actually fold the capital budget committee and put it into appropriations, kind of like how the Senate operates. So that's a little bit of the theory, and then I'm heading down the path of potentially being a budget writer, which I don't know that I want that, but I will humbly move forward. So I look forward though to serving on the appropriations. That is our budget writing committee for our general budget. We also going to be the ranking Republican, which I do appreciate that nod of confidence from my caucus leadership. I'll be the ranking Republican on general government and IT, which is a new committee. Kind of consolidated a few of them, so we'll see how that plays out. And but to the capital budget, I know a couple of people in here are interested in the pool for the high school and the senior center. We'll continue to be a strong advocate for those. I still have a voice in that committee, even though I'm not on it per se. So we'll get into the rest of these issues, I guess, in a little bit.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much to the Chamber for having me here. Many a years I was out there, so it's good to be up here. I was just did some math here. Senator Shelton probably had a chance to look at about 50,000 bills, and on average of 2,000 bills being heard in the Senate a year. They actually see less because of the way they work the bills through, which is kind of slows down the process. And I think it's good government to have one side speed them through and the other side kind of consider it quite closely. I'm just moving into my new office, and so I got a lot of learning to do, but I've been assigned to local government. I'm assistant minority ranking member on that committee. I'm on that committee because I'm really interested in, as all of you guys know, growth management issues, and that's the committee that deals with growth management, so I want to hit it head on. I want to make sure I work very hard to protect private property ownership rights. And I don't think they're protected very well, and I'm going to continue to work on that. Senator Sheldon and I hope, Drew, I haven't talked to him yet, we got a couple ideas of things that we can do to help out there. I'm going to serve on Education Committee and Public Safety, and I'm excited for the opportunity to work on those. I have 3 or 4 bills right now that I'm considering sponsoring as a prime sponsor, and I have several bills. One that I'm very interested in is all hazards mobilization for fire and police units in Washington State. We saw there was a problem. We have mobilization capabilities for wildland fires, but we do not have it for the other hazards. So if Shelton had a problem like an earthquake, we could spend up to 3 days waiting for a declaration of emergency before we got resources. So I'll be working hard on that. Thank you.
Thank you. We want to get you all out of here on time, so we're going to follow a format today that includes me briefly going through the 2015 legislative priorities, and then each of our elected officials will have a chance to comment on those priorities, whether they think our priorities have a chance, what they think they can do to help the business community. And then after that portion, they'll have a chance to look back on 2014 and sort of grade themselves in the legislature on how the legislature did for the business community. So with that, just as an introduction, the Government Affairs Committee of the Chamber is made up of 8 voting members and the chairperson. And every December at our meeting, we come up with legislative priorities for the upcoming session. And then this event is to kick off the session and to send them off to Olympia next week, knowing what the priorities of the Chamber are. First, as Senator Sheldon mentioned, we recognize that McCleary is going to be the issue. And we recognize that that's going to take up the majority of your time, and we ask that as you are considering ways to adequately fund education, that you always consider ways to reform administrative layers at every level of our education system as part of ensuring that the dollars that you spend are going directly to the classrooms. Second, One of the items that's always on our list is budget based on a set priorities of government system. And I think that at least 2 or 3 of you have expressed before that you agree with that approach. We think that that approach of setting priorities of government and then budgeting based on those leads to a situation where you can get rid of redundancies and programs that aren't working, and that's always something that we would like our elected officials to be doing, especially in the permitting arena and our tax structures. Third, workers' comp reform is still on our list. We recognize that the legislature did make some inroads 4 or 5 years ago to start reforming that system, but we just want to remind our elected officials that the average rates in Washington State have been continuously rising for the last 20 years, while we're seeing our neighbors to the south decrease consistently. And the difference is, our neighbors to the south, their system is not a state monopoly insurance system. There's private competition in Oregon. And I think what businesses will tell you in Oregon is that they have seen their rates go down, but they have not seen negative effects of the private competition. So we ask you to consider that, as well as other reforms to the system, small steps that you can take. We ask that you continue to protect our resource industries in this county and in our area. Obviously, shellfish industry and timber industry, they're the foundations of our economy, and we want you to keep that in mind every day as you go to Olympia. Any proposals for capital gains tax on any business, but also timber and shellfish, should be a big no, obviously. We think it's an income tax, whatever you call it. So we ask that you watch out for that. Transportation costs and climate control. The committee is aware that the governor has thrown out a cap and trade system proposal and has also voiced support for a carbon tax. And we ask that you consider the impacts of those systems on our rural economy and what we think is still a fragile economy. We were encouraged to see in the last couple of years that the Belfair bypass was included in an overall transportation package proposal. We recognize that these proposals are going to come along with some kind of revenue ask, and our continued request is that any new revenue should come along with significant reforms to the state transportation system. Last but not least, we are hearing a lot from our friends in local government that they are being strangled by unfunded mandates. And we think that it would be smart for the legislature to look at opportunities this year to maybe pause or roll back some of these unfunded mandates to give these local governments a chance to take a deep breath and catch up from the recession. So with that, I will give you each a chance to comment on those priorities and what you think the legislature is going to do or not do this year for business. And also comment on McCleary. I think a lot of people in this room are curious about how that's going to work out. So Senator Sheldon.
Well, Julie, thank you. I'll start with your last comment there about McCleary. I think, as I said, it will be the trademark issue of the legislature. There'll be some bills, and General will talk about them, because I think Drew's going to introduce one that says you fund education first with the first dollar and not the last dollar. So over the last 30 years, though, what the minority party now, the Democrats, have done has the past budgets which have continually decreased the percentage of education for the budget. So it's kind of like an alligator's mouth with the bottom jaw dropping the percentage that we spend on education and the total revenue going up. So for the last 2 years, we did reverse that for the first time. And I think that's very important to note, too, that we didn't get in this situation overnight. It took 30 years of neglect. So with $2.9 billion in education, our new funding, I think the vast majority of that will go to fund the McCleary decision. And I think the challenge is to hold back the call for new revenue. Our governor ran on a platform of no new taxes, and now there isn't anything, I think, that he hasn't found that he doesn't want to tax. The whole carbon tax issue is, I think, very clever, but let's face it, we are per capita the greenest state in the country, and with the hydropower that we have here, phasing out of TransAlta in Chehalis, the only coal plant in Washington, in the Northwest. All the things that we're doing individually as communities, we are absolutely the greenest state around. And it's very interesting to me, the Oregonian the other day said they were not going to have any editorials about climate change. It just didn't matter. You know, what some of these proposals are just playing, I think, playing politics, playing to a constituency that is primarily in the urban areas. We have a big challenge, and maybe I'm straying a little bit here, but I don't want to take too much more time on my portion here. Sometimes in Olympia, it's not really Democrat versus Republican, Republican versus Democrat, House versus Senate, Senate versus House. It's rural versus urban. And we are the most rural district in the state of Washington. You wouldn't think that, though. The 35th district would be the most rural in the state of Washington. You'd think it'd be Okanagan County or someplace. But we only have the city of Shelton as an incorporated area. Then we have a little bit of Bremerton in 35th. So we are very rural, and we make progress, I think, in Olympia when we find friends in other rural areas that are also struggling, that are trying to get good jobs in our communities, keep good jobs here, and make sure that our kids can live and work in Mason County and don't have to commute to Seattle or move to Portland or wherever to find work. So we're going to find some allies and work very hard, I think, this year to make sure that the other Washington is protected and it's not all about the urban area. If you look at the governor's proposal even for transportation, he's taken the Belfort bypass out. All the money for transportation now is going to go to the big mega projects. We have to fight very hard if we're going to have a transportation plan that helps the rural communities. Thank you.
So I'll start with K-12 and go from there. So I have introduced a bill that would create a separate K-12 budget, would require the legislature to pass it and deliver it to the governor by March 31st. It'd become a standalone budget, essentially a one-line item in the appropriations then. The reason for that, there's two main reasons. One, to truly prioritize education. It hasn't been done for the last 30 years, and much to my surprise, this is an ongoing debate now that I'm having an open in the Seattle Times with Ross Hunter, the budget writer for the House, and he's calling it a bumper sticker slogan, and he's vowed not to allow it to be heard. So we have an op-ed that's going in soon, and hoping to refute that. And I'm actually going to try and get it pulled to my committee because we have some broad oversight, but that's going to be a little bit of a political game playing there. But the other big part of it, which I think is missed by Representative Hunter, is that our districts are required to make their staffing decisions by May 15th. And as we've seen, we are usually doing a budget in June. And subsequently, the majority of school districts are giving pink slips to their staff because they can't anticipate that money, they can't bank on that money yet. And so that's the other part of that, is to put our districts in a spot where at least they can get their part of the job done and plan out their upcoming academic year. So I'm working to garner further support on that, hope to get that at least heard. Sometimes these things take a cycle or two to get implemented, but we'll keep pushing on that, and I'm hoping to get it to a hearing this year, and then we'll go from there and see what we need to do. On the budget, we have an 8% increase in revenue going into this biennium, 8%. The way the governor is talking, you'd think that we are having a 20% decline in revenue. Wants to tax everything, wants to tax carbon, which would be $1 to $1.17 per gallon on you at the pump. A $12 billion tax on industry in the state. We are, depending on which statistic you read, either the cleanest or the second cleanest state in the entire nation. Our carbon pollution on a worldwide basis is 0.0001%. You remove us, it doesn't even remove our carbon pollution from the world, doesn't even account for the rounding factor in Asia. That's a fact. But the way this governor is speaking, you'd think it's something different. I don't think he got the November 4th memo, frankly. So this is going to be an interesting session in that regard. And also along the budget, I'd love to make this quote my own, but it's not. Governor Walker of Wisconsin said this yesterday, and I think this is true at all levels of government. Budget should be made based on what taxpayers can provide, not on what government wants to spend. An 8% increase in revenue with no changes in our revenue structure going into this biennium. This will be the largest revenue we have had in this state in our state's history, with no changes. And you know, to say that we have to increase taxes, I think frankly is the easy way out. It's not, we need to sit down, we need to make fundamental reforms between education, Department of Transportation. I also have a bill in that regard. How would you, let me backtrack on a second to make this point for the Department of Transportation. If you took out a second on your home, or you refinance your home mortgage, and you take that money and you use it to pay your utility bill, your cable bill, your car payment, does that make any economic sense to pay interest on that for 30 years to meet your everyday expenses? Well, that's what we do with the DOT budget. We charge ourselves sales tax, we bond to pay for our DOT projects, we bond for 20 to 30 years, and we're taking the sales tax portion from that and putting it into the general budget. It's completely economically foolish to do that. And I have a bill, there's one bill out there that by another representative that would just take away the sales tax from DOT projects. So there's that one. I've introduced one that would prohibit us from bonding the sales tax. So if they want to charge sales tax on their own projects, fine, but we can't bond for it. We'd have to pay it out of existing funds. It accomplishes the same thing, but in another manner. And that's my time, so we'll come back, go to Dan.
So I had a chance to meet with the governor. We had about 20 minutes. I was concerned about his understanding of the logging industry, and it's not as broad as I would like it to be, so I'm working to educate the governor's office on that. And also his climate change. He pointed out a lot of things to me that was very scary. I talked to him about hydroelectric power and the fact that Mason County, the biggest part of the 35th district, gets 100% of its power from hydroelectric sources. And he said, yeah, but that's a fossil, Dan. We're going to get rid of that, and we're going to go to... That's really scary because there's billions of dollars of infrastructure, and it might be trillions now when you think about what it would cost to build the dams that we have in the Columbia and that sort of thing. So I'm going to work really hard on refuting his climate change issues. If you look at the study that his panel did, its conclusions are very trumped up. They didn't take into account the assumptions that just by building better vehicles, you know, Detroit building better vehicles, that we're going to be up to an average of 25 miles to the gallon. So if you put that in his model, we might achieve, and we'll come close to achieving just by attrition, his set carbon emission standards in Washington State. Department of Labor and Industries, yeah, we got to reform it. We're killing our businesses. The timber industry is getting hit very hard. But just the actual feller in the woods, the rates are enormous. DOT, Bertha right now, they're admitting they might need some more revenue. Oh my goodness, who knew that? The largest tunnel bored tunnel in history on landfill might need some more revenue. That is really scary because the company that put it in guaranteed that, you know, they had the ability to pay for it. The other thing in DOT is we're talking about retrofitting our ferries to gas, compressed natural gas. That's really concerning because these ferries are very old, and so the thought of putting this huge new propulsion system in these ferries at a very large cost, I don't think is a very good idea. So reforms, priorities of government model, I think is going to set us free in this budget cycle. Dino Rossi and Governor Locke had a very successful time fixing budget structural problems using the priorities of the government model, and I'll support that idea to the end. So, thank you.
Thank you. If any of you have any questions, go ahead and formulate those now. I'm going to pose a couple questions sort of looking back to these guys. So as you refill your coffee, think about what you want to ask, and we'll have time for a few questions. So I'd like to ask you all to sort of look back to last year, maybe comment on what you think is going to be different this year. The numbers have changed in the Senate, as you said, Senator Sheldon. The numbers have also changed in the House with the election of Representative Griffey and a few others. The margins are a lot closer. So are there going to be differences last year to this year? Are we going to see real reforms? Maybe we'll start with Drew, Representative McEwen this time, and then go to Dan, and then end with Senator Sheldon, and you all can comment on that.
Well, we're definitely in a tighter situation going into this session. With the Senate has increased its majority, and in the House, the majority has gotten narrower. So we are in a divided government, and I think that it creates opportunities, it creates challenges though too, and I just hope that cooler heads prevail on that. And I think the opportunity is that it forces both sides of the aisle to reach across and work together. And we started to see that. I don't have a reference point prior to my last 2 years, of course, but so I only have my first term to look at. But from what I heard from people that have been there longer than I had, I mean, that this past 2 years were the first time that we really started to see that. And I think you look at the budget, and Senator Shelton has spoken this many times, one of the most bipartisan budgets ever passed in our state's history. For the first time in 30 years, froze higher education tuition increases. Those are good things that have happened. We've put more into education, but we are going to have challenges going into this. Looking back on the last year, that was the first time we didn't go into overtime in quite some time. That was a positive. I don't hold out hope for this session on that. It's just, and part of that's just the nature of the beast. I mean, we're talking about spending $80 billion, and you get the budget forecast at the end of March, and we're going to adjourn at the end of April. I mean, the 3 weeks is pretty tough to put a $80 billion deal together. But looking back on 2014, we fought off a number of tax increases. There was not a transportation package, and I think that's good because there was a desire to increase the gas tax by 12 cents and have no reforms in DOT. I firmly believe that we need to have some very fundamental reforms in the Department of Transportation before we even consider asking the people to put more money into it. The Belfair bypass is crucial, and we need to see that. I think we need to lock arms though too with the other legislators in our region, especially in the Kitsap area, the South Kitsap Industrial Corridor, which would be a huge benefit to our area as well. So that's my time, but give that to Senator Sheldon.
Well, thank you. 2013 was probably my most interesting year, in 2014, and 2 years in Olympia. Senator Rodney Tom and I were able to team with the 23 Republicans to take control of the Senate. And I think most people thought, well, that'll last about a week. Then it went along, that'll last about another week, and well, that might happen about mid-session. It'll all fall apart. But it didn't fall apart. Senator Carroll, one of our allies in the Senate, Republican, died in office. They thought, well, that's all over now. They've only got 24, and he was quickly replaced by Senator Oban, who's been just a stalwart, a great person to serve with. So I think it'll be different in 2015 because I think people understand that we can stay together. We have one more member. We have 26 members now. So I think we'll be taken much more seriously, especially at the beginning of the session. I think, like I said last year, people just waited for things. But as Drew said, some of the accomplishments, I mean, we passed a budget with no new taxes. That was a balanced budget. We put over $1 billion into education and no increases in higher ed, first time since the 70s that had been done. So I think we have a lot of success to build on. I think that it set a standard for across the country. Also in New York State, there was a coalition that you can work together with the other party, that you can pass a budget that we did in 2014, which was passed 44 to 4, or excuse me, 48 to 1. The previous year was 44 to 4. So that's unheard of. I went back through had staff looked through history, and you had to go back 30, 35 years to find a year where people passed a budget like that. So it can be done, and we're going to work real hard to make sure we live within our means.
Representative Ricky, you weren't there last time around, but yeah, I think you can comment as an observer on what you see the difference.
Yeah, I spent 6 years of my life doing this, so yeah, I can see the differences. What I can tell you is the House Republicans are going to be much more relevant in all the discussions this year, which is good for rural communities. Every bill that I see come out from the other side has, I think, a very poor impact on the rural communities, be it the climate change that the governor thinks he can pass by executive order, which I don't see that power in our state constitution. So I think we're going to have to push as a legislative branch to say, Governor, you don't have that power, and we have the power to write law. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to work very hard to make happen. I think the Senate will have a little better time getting it done because they have a majority. So I think those are the big differences. You have a governor that thinks he has executive privilege to raise taxes in Washington State by billions of dollars as imposed on business. That is scary. And we're going to have to stand up as legislature and say, no, Governor, you don't have that power. Thanks.